Hey everyone, hope you're all doing well. My name is Hannah and welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for being here if you are new. I generally tend to do fashion videos and haul videos and not many pregnancy videos, but a lot of you have been asking me to do the C-section tips for plus size people. So I did a video on 5 tips or 5 things that I didn't expect in a plus size pregnancy, and it was quite popular. I will leave that linked in the description below if you are interested. But today I'm going to be doing a 5 tips or 5 sections of tips for a plus size C-section. So if you haven't watched my UK birth story, go and check that out. I'll leave that linked in the description as well. I ended up having an emergency C-section, if you didn't already know, and these tips will work for anyone that's had an emergency C-section or a planned C-section or whatever that might be. So I am going to start with clothing first of all. So one of my biggest tips for a plus size C-section is clothing tips. Now, what I would say is when you go to the hospital, make sure you take some really large granny panties. And the reason I'm saying that is because your C-section scar is usually underneath your belly. Mine's actually on my private area, on my missus, because my baby was already in the birth canal, so the C-section scar is a little bit lower than it generally is. But generally your C-section scar is in between your stomach and your missus. So what I tend to say is make sure you get some really big granny panties, the ones that go over your stomach, and that's just because you don't want any material touching your C-section scar, whether that be with the plaster on or with the plaster off. It's just a lot more comfortable if you don't have any material actually kind of touching it, or any seams is what I mean, so no seams of knickers or anything like that. So make sure you've got some very big knickers. And another thing that I really found very helpful in terms of clothing was some plissé pants. Now, don't know if you remember or if you know what plissé pants are, but I'll see if I can insert a picture. But it's that kind of material that's very shiny and very kind of slippery. And the reason I'm saying that is because when it comes to movement with your C-section, especially if you're in hospital or if you're at home, recovering at home, movement, so getting off and on of your bed, you have to kind of like slide off your bed, and it's really difficult when you've got like a cotton pair of trousers on or something to slide off the bed. You get stuck. So wearing like a plissé, however you pronounce it, that kind of shiny material pant, or like a disco pant or something, is a lot easier to kind of slip and slide off the bed. So in terms of clothing, I would really recommend loose flowy clothing, like big grandma knickers and some like very shiny or very slippery material on the bottom, so that you can actually kind of slip and slide off your bed a lot easier. I know that sounds really silly, but honestly I promise you it's going to be the best decision that you ever make. The next section that I want to give you some tips on is showering. So when it comes to showering your C-section, first of all, it's super scary when you have the plaster on it and you have to take the plaster off on like day 5 to day 7. It's super scary. Nobody wants to take it off. So make sure that you really get your plaster very wet before you take it off. Just because by making it very wet, the kind of glue or the stickiness seems to like loosen up, so it's not as hard pulling the plaster off when you get the plaster very wet. But anyway, when you are showering, after you finish showering your C-section, try not to put any shampoo or anything on there. Just use water for the beginning, just so that it doesn't sting, and then you could start using some kind of very mild soap on there. But once you've showered, make sure, especially if you've got overhang as well, make sure that you're using a hairdryer to dry your C-section. The midwives will even give you, well, they're not, I don't think they're allowed to give you this advice, but a lot of them give you this advice to use a hairdryer to dry your C-section scar, and that's because it really takes out any of the moisture that might be left. If you have an overhang and you are plus size, your C-section scar is going to be covered by your stomach, so it can get very moist under there, very foisty. Does anyone remember that word, foisty? It can get very kind of musty under there, very wet, very sweaty. So you need to make sure you're trying to keep it dry at all times. So using a hairdryer is your best bet for kind of taking out all of that moisture from the C-section scar. Now make sure you use the hairdryer on the cool setting. Now the reason I'm saying that is because if you use the warm setting, it can melt stitches, or if, say for example, it was glued together, then it can kind of cause that to melt or can cause problems. So make sure you're using the cool setting on your hairdryer and really get in there and dry the whole of your C-section scar. I would even kind of advise doing that 2 to 3 times a day just to make sure it's dry from sweat or anything else. So don't use the warm setting. As I said, it can melt stitches or glue, and always dry your scar with the cool setting. So when it comes to showering, really wet your plaster and then pull your plaster off. Use a mild detergent so it doesn't sting, and use water at first and then dry on the cool setting. The next set of tips I have for you is aftercare. So just general aftercare of your C-section. Now, when as I said, the C-section seems to get very moist, especially if you have an overhang, especially if you are plus size. It seems to get very wet. Obviously, it's very hot anyway because it's healing. Your body is healing, so that area is very warm anyway, because there's a lot of things going in motion, a lot of process kind of happening there, because you've got not just the scar up at the top, but there are scars under layers and layers of your skin. So that is healing, and it's getting very hot under there. Add a roll of fat on top of that from your stomach, and it is gonna get really hot and sweaty. So when it comes to aftercare, like I said, try and keep it dry throughout the day. I used to lie on my bed and hold my stomach up and just air it out at night. So when you are sleeping or getting ready for bed, maybe you hold up your stomach a little bit, let it air out for a while. But throughout the day, obviously, you've got to do stuff, you've got to be up and about. And honestly, these tips, I'm not just saying it, but these tips you should be doing for at least 6 weeks. I'd say at least 6 weeks, because otherwise you are going to get infected. I got infected twice, or my C-section got infected twice. So honestly, these tips really do help. So what I did for aftercare of my C-section to try and keep it dry is I would either get some toilet roll and fold the toilet roll up and then place it along my scar just to keep it from kind of collecting any moisture on the actual scar, and change that regularly. So every time I went to the toilet, I would change that. Or another really good tip is to take 2 panty liners basically and stick them back to back. So you've got panty liner on one side, panty liner on the other, and then lay that on your C-section scar. If you have an overhang, it's going to keep it in place. Like I said, this is specifically for plus size people. I mean, regular size or straight size people, you can take these tips as well, but I don't think a panty liner would stick to your stomach if you had a flat stomach. Do you know what I mean? But when you have an overhang, you can put the panty liner underneath your stomach, and then your overhang will kind of hold it to your scar and will collect all of the sweat or the dirt or grime or whatever might be there. So try and keep it dry throughout the day. I did it using a tissue, but you can also do it using a panty liner. I thought of that afterwards, and then I was like, oh my god, I could have been doing that all this time. Instead of using loads and loads of tissue up, I could have just used 2 panty liners stuck together side by side. Obviously you want to use 2, you don't want to use 1, because otherwise one of them will be stuck to your stomach and you don't want to be peeling that off at the end of the day or anything. It's going to be painful. So yeah, so that's general aftercare. Next section is movement. So movement in terms of when you are moving around with your C-section scar. Now obviously move slow and move often. I would really advise trying to get up on the first day. So as soon as you've had your C-section, after you've kind of rested for what, 12 hours or so, try and get up, go to the, obviously you've got to go to the toilet and stuff, but try and go to the toilet, walk around your bed in the hospital, for example. Try and get as much movement in there as you can, just because the more you move, the better you are going to heal. I know that doesn't sound right, like it doesn't sound correct, but honestly, the more you move, the better it'll be for you. Now my specific thing, so the kind of scariest thing for me movement wise was getting off of the bed. Now as you can see behind me, the next to me crib is pushed up against my bed, and then I've got, you know, a changing mat and a bedside table. So if I wanted to get off the bed, I would have to shuffle all the way to the end of the bed and then get off at the end of the bed. Now what I did was, first of all, I had a step stool at the end of my bed so that I could step on the step stool and then up onto the bed. Now I would advise getting up onto the bed by stepping backwards on the step stool and then getting up on the bed backwards, and then basically bum shuffling your way back to your area, your bed, your pillow, whatever. Now this is why I said the plissé pants or the shiny disco trousers really helped at night, because I could shuffle and slide across the bed. Now try and use the weight in your arms. Your arms are going to get so strong in the 6 weeks of healing, honestly. So I would push myself back with my arms so that I've not got any pressure on my abdomen or on my scar, because when you are using your legs, you're really using your stomach muscles as well, whereas when you're using your arms, you're using a lot of your upper body strength. So I would bum shuffle basically across the bed with my arms and moving slowly and often as well. Please don't pick up anything heavy. That's one of my massive tips. Like, I picked up a car seat and my C-section opened from one side. The car seat is not light, guys. Like, it's super heavy, and you don't realize that because, I mean, before I was pregnant, I was pushing 240 kgs on the leg press machine and deadlifting 90 kgs. Like, for me, a car seat was nothing. A 6 kg car seat is nothing. Do you know what I mean? But I literally picked up the car seat and I felt something pull, and I thought, oh my god, what is that? And I had a look, and my C-section opened up just on the surface a little bit in one corner. So it's really dangerous to pick up anything heavy, even at the 3-week mark, where you feel like you can move around, because by I think day 10 I was running up and down the stairs. I know you shouldn't, but I was running up and down the stairs, and I wanted to drive and stuff like that. But really, you do need to leave that time for healing. No matter how good you feel, honestly, just please leave it 6 weeks, because you will cause more trouble than it's worth. So move slow and often, and please don't pick up anything heavy. The last section of tips I have for you is sleep. Now, for sleep, obviously you're not going to be getting a great sleep because you will have just had a baby, and the baby's going to be up and it's going to be wanting you and wanting milk and wanting changing and stuff. What I would say, the best tip for sleep that I've got is sleeping slightly elevated. So if you have a pregnancy pillow, put your pregnancy pillow behind you, which is, it's kind of like a rainbow shape, basically, the pregnancy pillow. Put that behind you and sleep slightly elevated, like a 45-degree angle. I know it's going to be uncomfortable, but honestly, it's going to save you so much pain. If you are sleeping lying down and then pushing yourself all the way up, now, unless you are using your arms the whole way, my arms are too short to push me all the way up, do you know what I mean? It is going to be very painful, because you're going to be using your abdominal muscles again. So when you get up for your baby 2, 3, 4 times a night, you're going to be in a lot of pain. So if you are sleeping at that 45-degree angle, you're really going to help yourself and save yourself that pain as well. And actually, I found that by day 10 I was slipping further and further down, so I was going more and more flat the better it was getting, or the more comfortable I was getting. But to start off with, I slept for at least a week in an elevated position, and honestly, it wasn't that bad. I was that knackered anyway, I was asleep, so it wasn't that bad. But sleeping in an elevated position really does help you, and it does save you a lot of pain as well when it comes to your C-section scar. So those are the 5 areas. We had movement, sleep, showering, aftercare, and one more. What was the other one? Clothing. So 5 different areas. That's 10, but 5 different areas, 5 different types of tips for C-sections, especially for plus size people. Honestly, please follow these plus size section tips, just because they will really help. So yeah, please listen to me. I've had 2 infections. You don't want an infection. It's not pretty. And one thing I will mention as well, guys, just for normality wise, it is normal for your C-section scar to open up a tiny bit along the actual scar itself, but just on the surface, as long as it's not weeping or anything like that. I feel like nobody knows that that's what you expect, or that's what you're supposed to expect, for it to kind of just open up a little bit, have little holes along it, but that is normal, unless it's like smelly or weeping, or like there's a lot of pus coming out of anything. That is quite normal for you to see it kind of open in small areas, as long as there's no kind of smell coming from there and it's not hurting or stinging too much. So yeah, guys, so that's the video. I hope that you found it helpful. I hope that it helps you. Good luck with your C-sections. If you have planned ones, if you have an emergency C-section, then please take it easy, and yeah, enjoy your wonderful babies, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye, guys.